Valis III was released on the Sega Genesis and TurboGrafx-CD back in 1991 and 1992 respectively. Keep in mind that the original PC Engine CD version was released in 1990, so the Genesis version is actually based on the original PC Engine version. Okay, that's a real mouthful. So, because the Sega Genesis version was based on the PC Engine version, it's completely different than City of Valis, which was basically its own game. Here, Valis III on the Sega Genesis is pretty much the exact same game. Sure, it's missing around 4 or 5 stages, but it has its own unique stage, and the boss battles have been reworked. And when I say reworked, they've been reworked for the better. Now, the stages that did stay are mostly the same as the PC Engine version. There are natural graphical differences between the two, and naturally the cutscenes have been a little bit scaled back on the Genesis version. The voice samples have been mostly removed, and well, there are a couple of other differences, especially with the soundtrack. The version on the TurboGrafx uses the CD quality soundtrack, whereas the Genesis version is basically using chiptunes and MIDI files and what have you. But all that's to say, the Genesis version is a very good game, so if you can only have access to that version, I say, well, go ahead and try it out. But let's go ahead and talk about Valis III on the TurboGrafx-CD. The story of Valis III is pretty much your standard fare. An evil dictator wants the Sword of Valis so that he can combine its power with his own special sword in order to unlock ultimate power. Oh, and then there's this bit about the demon and spirit worlds plus Earth, and yeah, well, whatever. Let's just, put on our sexy armor and get to work. Valis III is one of the best entries in the series. Now, keep in mind there are only 4 games in the series, so that might not be saying much. The action is your standard action platformer, but this time around there's something unique. You actually have the ability to transform into 3 different characters. Of course, you have to find them first, a la Castlevania 3, but each of the different characters features a unique weapon. You can switch characters on the fly by simply pressing the run button. However, keep in mind that there are certain areas such as boss fights which prevent you from switching to another character, and all your characters share the same health pool. Yuko has her awesome sword, which blasts out a wave-like beam at enemies. Cham is basically Simon Belmont with a whip, obviously. And Valna has a pretty cool projectile attack that shoots magical blasts from her wand. There are 3 magic spells the girls can learn, and each character uses the spells completely differently. Valna can freeze enemies, while Yuko can perform homing attacks, and it's fun to see which character is the best to use under different circumstances and against different types of enemies. For the most part, the controls work surprisingly well this time around, except for the odd slide move. You have to press down and the run button together in order to get any of the girls to slide. Why couldn't they have just made it down and jump? I don't get that. The cutscenes are vastly superior to those found in Valis II, although I think the voice acting is actually worse this time around. The graphics are nice and bright, and the level design is pretty damn good this time. I'd say it's above average. They also fixed that nasty problem from Valis II where Yuko would have to walk a little bit and then attack because she basically walked too fast. This time around, there's absolutely no problems. You can run, you can jump, you can do whatever you gotta do. However, there is a problem with the boss fights, and that is they're boring. While Valis IV would eventually cap off the series, and we will talk about that, I think Valis 3 is probably my favorite in the series just because of the time it came out and the memories I have with the game. So if you're looking to start playing this series, I highly recommend you start with this one right here. And don't forget, like I said, the Genesis version is equally a very good game, and some people actually prefer it. Valis 3 on the TurboGrafx-CD is colorful, it features another incredible soundtrack, and above all, it's fun to play. And in my book, that's win, win, win. Go check it out.